cinema, how it came and what it did for us.
I think when cinema is being created purely for the artistic value,
Please put your hands together for Mr. Siddharth Roy Kapur.
This is our inaugurating event of our thought series. I'd like to point out to those who care to listen that why you? As most of you know that Mr. Siddharth Roy Kapur is one of the key cinematic personalities of our country. His journey is very much relevant, germane to our institute. Where he is standing today, where we are standing today, somehow it reflects each other. He started as a manager and from Procter & Gamble to Star to UTV, then merger of UTV with a global body like Disney, then starting your independent house, Roy Kapur Films. It makes it very useful for us. Independent filmmaking and scale of studio, global outreach and being rooted. Things like discipline of commerce and freedom of art. All these things make him uniquely suitable for this kind of discussion. So that is what we thought. No one else can be better for this inaugural event.
So I would like to in fact start with the thread which VC sir introduced, which is the tension between art and commerce. So since you studied commerce, you come from management background, and then you were drawn towards cinema, how actually your perception of this tension has also emerged and evolved over a period of time?
you know, what I try to do is not look at it as a tension which necessarily needs to be sort of pulling into opposite directions. Because I think first, if one is able to arrive at what we are talking about with respect to cinema, are we talking about cinema as a commercial art form, or are we talking about it as a art for art's sake sort of, art form? And both are as valid as the other. I think when cinema is being created purely for the artistic value of, the project, without regard to the commerce involved. And there are some projects like that which are backed by patrons or are backed by grants or trusts that really are about the artistic integrity of something without paying heed to the commerce of it, then that's a separate discussion. But I think when you're looking at it as a commercial art form where whoever's put money into it is entitled to receive that money back, then I don't like to see the two things in tension. I like to see them as actually pulling in the same direction. The best kind of commercial cinema is the kind where the creator, who is the director in most cases, doesn't feel that they have compromised in any way in the story that they wanted to tell, but their intention was to tell it for the largest possible audience that story could reach out to. And they never saw any duality in that, because the story they wanted to tell was one that would appeal to the largest possible audience. Or if the director understands that, okay, given that my story might not appeal to the largest possible audience, I want to tell it within a financial construct that will therefore make sense, because I know my audience is going to be limited, and therefore I know that I need to keep certain budgetary constraints in mind. So the way I try to approach it, especially when there is a so-called debate between the creative and the commercial sides of a film, is remind everyone that we're on the same page. And the idea is to tell a great story, because that great story is going to sell tickets. And because what is commerce? Commerce is basically many people who enjoy the experience you've put in front of them, wanting to experience it more and more, or large numbers of people wanting to experience it, and some wanting to experience it repeatedly. So that's what commerce is about, really. I don't like to look at it as a tension.
It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. And one way of looking at it is that a deeper understanding of commerce may perhaps enlarge the ambit of freedom, creative freedom. But fact, and as we understand, unlike any other art, I can write a poem sitting inside my room. I can paint a painting just sitting inside on my own. But if I have to make a film, it is imagination managed through capital, labor, technology, audience's attention, and so many other things. This is all understood. But the fact is that it makes a difference whether at the helm K. Asif is there or a person of an OTT platform, employee of that, who is just looking at it from the point of view of shareholders' value and such other things. There will be a difference in the output if he is greenlighting creative decisions. Yeah. So how do you see
what I've tried to do is never judge the person by the position they're sitting in, judge them by the quality of what input they're giving you.
Exactly.
Because very often so-called auteur directors might have no idea what the audience actually wants to watch. And someone sitting in a position where it's very easy to caricature them as the suit in the room can have a very cogent, perspective on a very important artistic part of your project. So I think the first thing that one must do is treat people as people rather than the positions that they're in. I don't deny that there could be a lot of ham-handed executives sitting in positions where you have to manage around them. But I think all I would encourage everyone to do is to not try to put people into boxes and try to just engage with them one-to-one and understand where they're coming from and take what they're saying rather than who's saying it. That I think is very important. Having said that, cinema is as collaborative art form as you can get. So at the end of the day, you are having to work with all kinds of people, and navigating that is like running a small army. So as a director or as a producer, you really need to have a high IQ and EQ going consistently. You've got to be able to wear a creative hat, a commercial hat, a psychological hat, sort of accounting hat, all kinds of hats at different points of time. And I think you need to embrace that and enjoy it. Because if any of those things makes you feel, yeah, this I really don't want to be involved in, and then you're not going to pay attention to that, that's finally going to tell in the output, whether that's a creative output or the commercial success of your project. So that I think is very important.
No, I meant to ask this question also in a sense of your journey, that when you started in late 1990s, the situation of film business was different. Then it drastically changed over last 25, 30 years. So how do you actually see these changes contributing to the space for artistic voices to yet be able to say the stories they believe in? So do you see that space expanding, shrinking? How do you see that?
It depends on how you define that space. If we're talking about it theatrically, I do think that the bar to what constitutes a theatrical project has definitely gone up. I don't think there's any denying it. I think we all see it in our own behavior, right? Earlier, cinema was really the only medium of leisure and entertainment. You had no other options. Today, everyone's endlessly scrolling reels. That's a time sucker. They can go to a mall, they can go to a live performance, they can go to a stand-up show, they can go to a concert, they can go on a holiday. There's a lot more options for people for leisure and entertainment. So that bar to what constitutes a film that people will come to pay money for has gone up. Which means, therefore, what happens? You tend to start believing that, okay, it's only the larger-than-life films, either the nationalistic, jingoistic films on one side, or the toxic love stories on the other side, or the horror comedies on the other side, that are going to work theatrically. And while that has tended to be true over the last few years, I haven't lost hope in the fact that great high-concept cinema can still work at the theaters, right? But what has happened is that romantic comedies, light dramas, a light romance, those are genres that now have found it much more difficult theatrically. The good part is this new technology called streaming has been invented, right? And you can now tell different kinds of stories on streaming platforms. So I don't know if I would have been able to tell a story like Rocket Boys as a film, right? Something about Homi Bhabha and Vikram Sarabhai and them having competing visions for India's future and their intertwined relationships actually could only be told as a streaming series. So it's given that filmmaker the opportunity to be able to tell that story in the way they want to tell it. So I think if you look at the overall expanse rather than just theatrical, I think the scope for storytelling has actually increased. And I'd encourage everyone to look at it as you are storytellers, right? you want to tell your story in the way that you want to tell it. And you are audiovisual storytellers. And so look at streaming and embrace streaming as a very, very potent way in which to tell certain stories that you might not have the ability to tell theatrically, given the market situation at this point of time.
Totally agree with you. Like, for an institute like us, who is a cinema first institute, and you will agree that any filmmaker makes a film for a bigger screen, keeping that in mind. Definitely learning the art from that sense also. But what I think is needed nowadays, that so-called hierarchy of prestige with regard to cinema and other formats needs to be diluted a little bit.
Tell me, it's FTII, right? It's not FII. I would expand the scope of the T to say television today is streaming as well. You know, so I don't think that goes against the grain of the institute at all. You know, in many ways, television has moved to streaming as well. I think it's a more all-encompassing term now, and therefore I don't see any dissonance in what the objectives of the institute have always been. Cinema, of course, is been around for 100 years. We all have grown up being mesmerized by the screen. That's why we're all here today. But it is the FTII. So I would give some importance to the T.
I think that, as you said, that story is important. It may require a collective darkness of cinema, or it may require intimate viewing of a digital kind, or it may require a long form OTT series. All that is there. तो सबसे बड़ी चीज़ होती है कि आपको स्टोरी का प्रारब्ध पता होना चाहिए, डेस्टिनी ऑफ द स्टोरी.
बिल्कुल.
If you know that as a filmmaker, perhaps you can decide how to tell it in the best way. So that destiny of the story is the first thing that needs to be understood by a filmmaker.
No, absolutely. In fact, taking off from that, I was thinking that when we are now looking at theatrical and streaming as two, let's say, alternatives before us, is it possible to think of redefining theatrical experience outside of the existing infrastructure, where we can have, let's say, a network of micro cinemas? Because in one of your interviews, you said that what we need is expansion of theaters. So can we also think of expansion of these smaller theaters of 100, 120, 150 capacities, where independent films, which are not even, let's say, mid-budget films of 2010s, but are independent films which are made in regional languages or documentaries and so on, can also be shown so that we do not necessarily restrict ourselves to theatrical with the given infrastructure? So how do you think, let's say, a production ecology can work towards that?
I hope that does happen, and I think it's a very, it's a very progressive thought to have. I just think the market forces have to support it, both the ability for someone to put capital into it and being able to generate the demand from audiences to be able to justify that investment.
Right.
I think what people get a little concerned about is there might be pockets of people who want to access that kinds of content. For example, at Regal Cinema in Bombay now, every Thursday there's a screening of a film, and that's packed. But if there were 50 Regal cinemas across Bombay and we were showing that film, would they be able to justify that show at that time across all the cinemas? Is there that much demand? I don't have the answer. It might very well be there. But for someone to actually invest in the capital, that chicken and egg situation is always there about
Absolutely.
being able to support it.
No, what I was thinking is that, see, cultivation of audiences' taste has been one of the important challenges before cinema in 20th century. So is it possible that we look at this as a question where we not only develop these micro cinemas and restrict them to only metropolitan areas, but take them outside, but also work towards cultivation of the taste where the production ecology and the film educators come together? Yeah, what we've traditionally been calling film appreciation, can it be kind of recalibrated towards this, where instead of just calling it demand generation, we also look at it as a cultivation of taste? Is it possible, this kind of a collaboration?
It's possible. It's absolutely possible. You need someone to have the passion and the drive, both creatively and commercially, to do something like this. I think that's, you need a champion. I mean, the Film Heritage Foundation that has been started by Shivendra Singh Dungarpur has only happened because one man had this vision of wanting to preserve the cinematic heritage of the country. And he's done it. And now he's figured out a way to be able to raise the money, to be able to get supporters, and he's really created an ecosystem around it. I think you need someone to have that passion to be able to do it.
Absolutely. What do you think, sir, about these kinds of networks to be opened up?
I'll start with the thing which you said, the mini cinema theaters and other things. Fact is that cinema, just think of cinema as a technology, how it came and what it did for us. Basic thing is that the strongest point of this entire thing is this publicness, that we have to do it like this. ठीक है, other things are coming in, but this is something which came and created this kind of experience, a possibility. That publicness is very important, and it is perhaps as we know that it is a quintessential modern public art form.
Absolutely.
A modern public art form. So publicness of this requires screens, affordable screens. Main चीज is ticket का दाम भी देखना पड़ेगा. अगर if you have to go back to a situation where it becomes a habit, in current scenario it cannot happen. First thing is that. Second is availability of a screen, as you have clearly said. Availability of screen is pathetic at this stage right now. That is required to be really ramped up fully. Somehow we'll have to get back that publicness of this, our beloved art form. Magic happens in a darkened cinema hall, for me at least. There are things that I know that sometimes story demands different formats. But the thing is that magic happens in a darkened cinema hall along with other people.
Absolutely. And along with the irreducible collective nature of the viewing experience, another important fact we cannot ignore that, the regional cinemas actually find it even more difficult to fit themselves on either side, either the theatrical or the streaming, because not many streaming would actually take up the quote-unquote regional content, especially if they're coming from smaller regions. So in that case, actually this discussion emerged in a roundtable of a Marathi film fraternity, where they actually are developing this kind of a network where already some kind of cinemas are existing. So I was thinking that whether the production ecology at a national level can actually think of cultivating this.
So it'll have to be a joint venture between the exhibition ecology and the production ecology, because the exhibition sector will actually make the investment and the production sector will have to convince them that they'll back it up with content to feed that investment. So it's going to be a bit of a jugalbandi between the two. If something like that has to happen. I think the exhibition sector at different times, because we're such an under-screened market and there are such screen dark areas within the country. I mean, you look at the number of screens in UP, our most populous state, it's like, I think at last count 200 screens for a population of that size, which is ridiculous. So the exhibition sector was trying to come up with a modular, low-cost, efficient, cheap, clean solution to it, where it can franchise out a certain format of a theater to different people in different cities. I'm hoping that happens. That comes up every now and then. It's just that we've had COVID happen in the last few years. You've had the exhibition sector reeling from that. They now feel like they're coming back. So I think hopefully in the next 5 years, they'll feel on a better footing to be able to actually put new investments in. Right now, they've been actually shutting down screens and reopening new screens. So there's been a, that plus minus has been going up, but not by that much. This will involve a completely new effort. So hopefully they'll make it in the next 5 years.
Well, especially because this discussion is even more relevant on the backdrop of actually the future of film education and pedagogy, that our institution is also under the transition moving to a university structure. So we also keep thinking that how do we actually address these challenges where there is a proliferation of different formats, then also challenge posed by artificial intelligence. So how do you see actually, and particularly the kind of demand for, you also say in your interviews that the demand for a structured training to writers or structured training to producers. So how do you actually see these challenges being absorbed and incorporated? What kind of a film pedagogy it would require?
I think an openness to all kinds of cinema. I know that what happens is that our traditional approach is to look at the orthodoxy of good cinema being taught. I'm not saying teach bad cinema. I'm definitely saying teach all kinds of cinema. So I think embracing the art form that is commercial Hindi cinema as well in the way that we teach ourselves is important. Because I think to have a fully formed view of being a commercial filmmaker in our country, if that's what you choose to be, whether work as a DOP in commercial cinema, as a director, etc. You need that completely well-rounded education. So I think a study of all kinds of cinema from around the world, but very importantly, our own cinema, and not just our parallel cinema or our art house cinema, but our commercial Hindi cinema, at least the ones that stand out as being worthy commercial movies that have actually been able to reach out to masses of people. What the art and science is behind those as well. Because then I feel we'll be fully prepared to enter into an environment that has the demand for well-rounded, and well-educated students of cinema.
What you are saying is absolutely right. It is very clear that FTII has the advantages of deep in craft. FTII has advantage of being a space where risks can be taken, depth is valued, and there is a distinct cultural seriousness that we try to adopt. Formats will keep on coming and going, and we cannot chase them. But at the same time, we cannot ignore them also. So there has to be some basic irreducible core of cinema education.
So how do you see this irreducible core of film learning, which every entrant into the industry needs to have, irrespective of the formats? How would you define it?
So I'd say the craft of it is the craft of it, right? Each of the crafts, from editing to cinematography to sound to even direction and acting, I think the craft of it is core, and that will not change depending. But I think being able to be exposed to a multiplicity of all kinds of cinema rather than just one kind, being open to all kinds of sensibilities of storytelling, and not feeling like you're holding one above the other, being able to actually look at the commercialization of your art and your craft and the best way in which to, because you're a storyteller, your first story is going to be to convince someone to make your film. That's the first story you're going to tell, or your series, right? And that is not a story that should be looked down upon. Your final story will be told, but that is your first story, right? And that story very often we disregard and feel like, okay, that's going to be the sales part of it, the schlepping part of it, the schmoozing part of it, and we'll get to it, But I think if you take that up as a challenge about how am I going to compellingly be able to present to potential collaborators, whether it's actors, whether it's financiers, whether it's producers, what story I want to tell, and be able to have my 1 minute version of it, my 10-minute version of it, my half-hour version of it, my 1 hour version of it, and my full-blown version of it, and put some time and attention into that as well, and not look down on that process, because this is show business. So it's show and it's business, right? There are two parts of it. Sometimes we focus only on the show and we don't focus on the business. And I think, or sometimes we focus on the business and not on the show. So I think it's very, very important to have both parts working concurrently.
This kind of a industry preparedness, are we expecting it to be taught at the level of film pedagogy, or is it something the students would learn on the job? Or
it can be something they learn on the job. It'll just take them a lot of hard knocks to be able to get there. I think if the runway can be prepared for them in the course of their time in a place like this, where they can be prepared for what is to come and understand that these are things that I also need to be aware of. I'm not saying make it a big part of the curriculum, but at least if it is part of the curriculum in some way, then I think everyone will be better prepared to come out of the hallowed halls of academia, and then when they find themselves in the big bad world of having to actually pitch their movies and not feel that cognitive dissonance of I didn't sign up for this. I was watching Fellini yesterday and today I'm having to sit in some office in Andheri and tell this guy my story in 1 minute. I don't want to be in this position. I think everyone should be ready for what they have to encounter.
Similarly, like for example, creating industry-ready artists and professionals, how should the pipeline work? Obviously, we are trying and we are getting people from industry. Industry comes to FTII, FTII goes to industry. All those things are happening. But where do you see the structured version of this? how can a body like Guild, Producers Guild, or how can a studio like yours or some other studio can be part of this process?
I think that's a great question. See, you actually already answered the things in your comments just before this about the things that are required. From contracts to securing your IP to being able to pitch to you know what it is. I think being able to bring people in from the industry, from the business side of it, to help to co-create the curriculum for one course that might be like this will be helpful. So they'll tell you from their side what are the things that they look at when they're talking to writers, when they're talking to directors, when they're talking to someone who's come to them with a pitch, so that they can actually input into, oh, my life would be so much easier if someone were able to come to me and give me this kind of an understanding of what they want to make, right? That I think might be the most, sort of constructive way to do it.
Do you see Roy Kapur Production House and the production ecology willing to take that step to
why not?
To that
because
kind of
I think if the idea for them is that you will get a much more market ready set of talented professionals who want to come into the system, why would we not want to be involved? And I'd say that a lot of producers would want to actively collaborate on a curriculum of that nature.
Now coming to the unresolved question before all of us is artificial intelligence and its implications and consequences for film production and so on. So you have a specific position and stance on artificial intelligence which takes us beyond AI anxiety and also starts looking at it in what ways it can be useful. So could you elaborate upon that?
Sure. I mean, I want to preface this by saying we're in the throes of the change right now. So anything that I say right now, I don't know how relevant it's going to be a few months from now. So I can only say it based on what I know today, right? And I think in theory, I've always believed that you can't fight technology beyond a point, and it's a useless fight. You're going to lose it. So if Microsoft Excel came in and accountants still wanted to do things on their own because that's the way they've learned to do accounting, someone else was going to come and replace them. I mean, the examples down the centuries are numerous, right? Now, AI, good or bad, is the first kind of technology that seems to at least be mimicking sentience and human behavior, and there is a back and forth with it. It's not just a tool. So I'm not going to say treat it like just another tool, because the fact is it's not just another tool. That is, I think, what we're all grappling with right now. The fact that something can have a mind, so to speak, of its own and go off and do things on its own and come back is something that I don't think we've made our peace with. So on one hand, I would encourage everyone to use it and to understand it extensively. But at the same time, I can't deny that I am wary of the changes that it might bring about with respect to the human involvement in our art form, right? And I personally would hate for human beings to be cut out from large parts of what we do today. And therefore, I think it's very important that the industry gets together to be able to create some guardrails around how AI is going to be used. But till then, till that happens, I would encourage everyone to embrace it, use it as much as you can, understand it, so that you don't feel left behind. It is, whether we like it or not, going to be used in various areas within our business, if not all of them.
We have to take a principled stand on it. Whatever stand is there, we have to engage, we have to take a principled stand. As it is, perhaps I've been told we are starting an AI club after hours. So that perhaps whatever, just to develop the ethical aspect of it, just to see how we should respond to it. We cannot just look away from it and say that it will go past us and everything. It is something where we have to have a stand, we have to have tools, we have to have other things. So that is very important. And I will also propose maybe FTII can take a lead with the help of certain people to develop some kind of body where we can see that how we can protect human aspect of art form from the onslaught of AI. So perhaps FTII's sense of deep craft and other things will come handy there. That is something we can do.
Yeah. So if you would like to, in fact, tie some of the threads, open up during the conversations, and would like to offer a closing remarks from your side. It'd be interesting.
Sure. No, firstly, it's always, I must say, very inspiring for me to come here, just take a break from a day in Bombay and come here and see your lovely campus and you know, open my mind up to what the younger generation is wanting to do and the challenges that you're facing, and but also the opportunities that you have. I just encourage all of you to be very open to all kinds of influences and to not feel, because it's such a beautiful place to be, you know, cocooned also, that sometimes you can tend to be, you know, insulated from the real world outside, because that real world will come at you pretty quickly once you get out of campus and you want to actually get your movies made. I think it's very important to engage with popular culture also, and to understand what's being made. I put myself through every Hindi film that releases every Friday, whether I like it or not. I'm in the business. You have to engage with it. You can't keep yourself in this bubble where you're not engaging with what the masses of our country are loving and enjoying. You might choose not to make it. You might choose not to make that cinema, but to keep yourself protected from it, I feel will lead to you having some very hard knocks when you come out into the final market and you say, what did I study and what world have I come out into? So along with all the wonderful movies that you're watching here, I'd encourage you to expose yourself to everything that's out there and be able to be as well-rounded as you can be. All the best.